Hello and welcome. Let's start today by talking about the lymphatic system, lymphoid organs, and tissue. So here when we go through and we talk lymphatic system, first we'll talk and mention components. The components and the functions of the lymphatic system we'll go through and we'll check out real quick. So first here, let's talk parts. When we talk parts of the lymphatic system, you'll see the lymphatic system is going to consist of three parts. We've got first the lymphatic vessels. Number two, we'll have the lymph that's found in the vessels. And number three will be the lymph nodes that are responsible for cleaning the lymph as it passes through. So when we talk about lymphatic vessels are going to be a network of vessels. They are the network of vessels that are going to carry lymph from place to place. Next then are going to be, you can see we've got their lymphoid cells, tissues, and organs. Next, when we talk lymphoid cells, tissues, and organs, we're going to go through and we're going to look at all the various types of cells we're going to have here. So this will kind of cross over with the previous chapter of blood that we have already gone through, we've talked about. We'll look at lymphoid tissue. We'll look at and see how it's found. And then we'll go through and we'll look at all the various lymphoid organs, and we'll check all of those organs out there as well. So then the lymph nodes, right there, we said that they're going to be responsible for cleaning the lymph as it passes through. So let's talk first then lymphatic vessels. Let's talk lymphatic vessels. When we talk lymphatic vessels, let's talk function first. They are an elaborate system of drainage vessels. The lymphatic vessels are an elaborate system of drainage vessels that collect excess protein-containing interstitial fluid, the excess protein-containing interstitial fluid and return it to the bloodstream. Now, when we talk about lymph itself, we'll see, is going to be interstitial fluid that's found in the lymphatics, in the lymphatic vessels. It's a clear fluid. So it contains various components, like we said, protein to lipids and various other components inside of it. Now, when we look at the structure of our lymphatic vessels, when we look at the structure of these lymphatic vessels, the lymphatic vessels, they form a one-way system. They form a one-way system in which lymph flows towards the heart. These lymphatic vessels will begin at the level of the lymphatic capillaries. Now, when we talk about lymphatic capillaries, we'll see first they're absent in the central nervous system, bone, and in teeth. These lymphatic capillaries, they are microscopic, blind ending, and this is where the transport system begins. So they mark the beginning of this transport system. These lymphatic capillaries are going to be found weaving between tissue cells. They are found weaving between tissue cells and blood capillaries in the loose connective tissue of the body, and we can see that here very nicely in this image. So when we zoom in on these capillaries, you can see here then how they're blind-ended. This is where they begin at. Here you got these mini valves, these flap-like mini valves. This is how lymph is going to make its way in through these valves. And then you can see here it'll travel all the way up to and hook up into our bloodstream. So they have mini valves. These mini valves are flap-like, and they're formed by the endothelial cells. These flap-like mini valves, they're formed by the endothelial cells. Next, then we have our lymphatic collecting vessels. So these lymphatic capillaries are going to be responsible for routing lymph then to the lymphatic collecting vessels. Now, when we talk about the lymphatic collecting vessels, you can see these lymphatic collecting vessels, they receive lymph from the capillaries, as we've just mentioned, and they have the same three tunics as veins do. However, they are thinner walled, though. The lymphatic collecting vessels have more internal valves. They have more internal valves, and they anastomose more. Now, when we talk about the exact anatomical distribution, you'll see the exact anatomical distribution is going to vary. It's going to vary greatly between individuals. So it'll vary from individual to individual. These collecting vessels then will route this lymph into the lymphatic trunks. Now, when we talk about the lymphatic trunks are going to be formed by the union of the largest collecting vessels. By the union of the largest collecting vessels. And they drain, these lymphatic trunks, they drain fairly large areas of the body. Some major trunks, we'll see some major trunks are going to be named for the regions from which they collect lymph. Some will be named for the regions from where they collect lymph. So when we go through and we talk about our lymphatic trunks, first we can go through and we can see this image depicting the general distribution of the lymphatic collecting vessels. Along with that, regional lymph nodes. And you can see these lymph nodes are going to be named for the region where they're found. Cervical in the cervical region. Okay, here you can see inguinal in the inguinal region. Axillary in the axillary region. Mammary in the mammary region. Okay, and so forth. Next, in here, we can see when we move through, here we're going to be able to appreciate some of these lymphatic trunks. So here we can see the major lymphatic trunks and the ducts in relation to veins and surrounding structures. We're going to go through this now thoroughly. So first we have our lumbar trunks. The lumbar trunks are going to be found as a pair. They will be found as a pair, and they're going to be responsible for draining lymph from the lumbar region. Then we have the bronchomediastinal. If you listen to the names, you should be able to put two and two together. Bronchomediastinal. Now, the bronchomediastinal are also going to be found as a pair. Also found as a pair. Here we can appreciate we've got the left bronchomediastinal trunk. And then here we have the right bronchomediastinal trunk. Two subclavians, a pair of subclavian lymphatic trunks, right? We can see there. A pair of jugular, we can see there. And then down here, back down here, we can see one intestinal lymphatic trunk. So again, when we talk drainage, you should be able to put two and two together and understand what's being drained into where and what not now. Now we have these lymphatic ducts now. So here we took care of the lymphatic trunks. Let's talk about the lymphatic ducts. When we talk lymphatic ducts, there are two large ducts that are going to be found here in the thoracic region. And the first one includes the right lymphatic duct. When we talk about the right lymphatic duct, I'd like you to know, is going to be responsible for draining lymph. Now, it drains lymph from the right upper limb, and the right side of the head and the thorax, Next, then here you can appreciate that right lymphatic trunk right in here. So it drains that lymph from the right upper limb, the right head and neck region, right? Head, thorax, neck, and the right side, basically of the body, right in this area. So from head, neck, upper limb, and thorax. Actually, here's this picture here. It's color coordinated, giving you a full-on idea of exactly what we have going on there. So now, instead of just visually imagining it, you can actually see it now. So all thanks to that right lymphatic duct. And this is how that duct is going to drain. When it drains, it empties all that lymph you can see into the right subclavian vein. Right into that right subclavian vein before the internal jugular comes into contact with it. And then they're going to form the brachiocephalic veins, as we've discussed. So right in here then, you see where the right lymphatic duct hooks up into the bloodstream. Next then is the thoracic duct. Here we can appreciate the thoracic duct. The thoracic duct is much larger in size. Since it's much larger in size, you can see there as it's also going to drain a much larger region. So when we talk about its drainage, it's going to drain lymph from the rest of the body. It's larger in size, and it's going to receive lymph from the rest of the body. So coming back to that color-coordinated image, you can see that there very well. The rest of this body here, all thanks to the thoracic duct. And now here we can see the thoracic duct. The thoracic duct is going to make its way all the way up and around. All the way up and around, and comes and inserts right in. And also now into the subclavian, but however here on the left side. So right down here, bronchomediastinal we can see, and the bronchomediastinal, right? They're basically draining their areas. And then here, head and neck we've got, and then upper limb. And then here, head, neck, upper limb, you can see they have a little short route as well, just coming right in, into where that thoracic duct is going to enter into that subclavian. So thoracic duct comes from all the way around here, comes around, turns, and makes its way into here. And then you can see just inferior to it, you've got then the bronchomediastinal. Next then here, we can continue forward, and we continue forward, then we've got the cisterna chyli. The cisterna chyli is going to marks basically the beginning point of the thoracic duct. So when we talk about the cisterna chyli, it's the beginning point of the thoracic duct, and it's found around the anterior part of the first two lumbar vertebrae. It'll be found around the anterior part of the first two lumbar vertebrae. And what it is, it's an enlarged sac. It is an enlarged sac that collects lymph from the two large lumbar trunks that are going to be draining the lower limb, and also from the intestinal trunk that's going to drain the digestive organs. Now, when you talk about the transport of lymph is sporadic and slow. This system is a low pressure conduit. And you're going to have, and we'll see, we're going to have the same mechanisms as veins to return basically lymph. So we're going to return lymph the same way we return blood in our veins. Milking action, pressure changes in the different cavities, and then valves there to prevent backflow. About 3 liters of lymph. We'll have about 3 liters of lymph that enters the bloodstream every 24 hours. Every 24 hours. Next, then, let's talk about our lymphoid cells. Let's talk about our lymphoid cells. Here we can appreciate lymphoid tissue, and we'll come back and we'll check all this stuff out there as well. Now, when we talk about lymphoid cells, a couple of cells here I want to mention to you guys. The first cell type we're going to have here are going to be our lymphocytes. So when we talk lymphoid cells, lymphocytes, main cell population. Now, when we talk lymphocytes, they are the main warriors of the immune system. They arise in the red bone marrow, and they're going to mature, we saw, into T cells and B cells. T cells, also known as your T lymphocytes, are going to protect the body along with B cells, as we have gone through, we've mentioned. Now, when we talk about our B cells, also known as B lymphocytes, so make sure you go through and you understand their functions, like I said, thoroughly there, because you're seeing them here again. You're going to be responsible for knowing their functions. T cells and B cells, right? We said B cells become plasma cells, and then they're going to form antibodies to help protect us against antigens. Okay, so make sure you've got all that down there. Macrophages, we've seen there as well. Macrophages are going to play a role in protection by phagocytizing foreign substances. Macrophages also play a role in protection by helping to activate T cells, by helping to activate our T cells. The next cell population you have to know about here are going to be dendritic cells. They also play a role in protection by capturing antigens and bringing them back to the lymph nodes. And then your reticular cells. We talk reticular cells, we have a couple of different types. One type are fibroblast-like cells, and they actually produce the reticular fiber stroma of our tissues, of the lymphoid tissues, the lymphoid organs. And then the second type are going to act as antigen presenting cells. They will act as APC cells, antigen presenting cells. So when we talk about the stroma, that's a network that supports basically these other cell types. So this is a network within our lymphoid tissues that supports other cell types. Remember we talked about the reticular fibers being inside of these organs, and they help to protect. It's like a police officer using an area to, the tree to sit near and get people who are going to be speeding by, or, something of that nature. So, stroma. Next then is lymphoid tissue. Now, when we talk lymphoid tissue, we'll see lymphoid tissue is going to be one of the main components, obviously, of our lymphoid organs. And this lymphoid tissue is going to be important because of a couple of different reasons. Number one, lymphoid tissue is going to house and it's going to provide a proliferation site for our lymphocytes. Number two, lymphoid tissue we'll see is going to be important because it furnishes an ideal surveillance vantage point. It furnishes us, or our cells basically, with an ideal surveillance vantage point. Now, even when we say cells, most importantly, right, it's our lymphocytes and macrophages. So it's going to allow our lymphocytes and macrophages to basically occupy that area in there and then mount a response if they need. Now, when we talk about our lymphoid tissue is going to be found to have reticular connective tissue there. So when we talk reticular connective tissue, it's basically going to be the lymphoid tissue, which is going to make up these lymphoid organs. So when we talk reticular connective tissue, I want you to know reticular connective tissue is going to be basically a type of loose connective tissue which is going to be found dominating all lymphoid organs except for the thymus, and we're going to see macrophages. They're going to live on the fibers of the reticular network. And like we said, the network is going to provide support to them, or they're going to use the network, the fibers, to basically do surveillance and whatever else we mentioned there. It's like I think I told you guys a story as well when we were going down the 15 freeway before. There used to be a tree where the two freeways. Okay, first at Oak Hill when we're going down, the two freeways separate, and then when you get back down that first hill, the freeways come back together. Where they both come back together, there used to be a big tree there. I don't know if you guys know, but a police officer, CHP, used to be able to sit back there, and it was providing them with the surveillance point, a vantage point. So they were kind of like the white blood cell, and they're capturing the antigens, the bad people that are speeding down the hill. And just one way to think about it. So that's exactly what these reticular fibers are going to be doing for the organ, and then also for the cause, and then for those white blood cells. Now, when we go through, we talk reticular connective tissue. So that's going to be, again, one component of lymphoid tissue. Now, when we look at the organization, the tissue organization, we'll see our lymphoid tissues can have diffuse lymphatic tissue within them, or they can have lymphoid follicles. And some of them we'll be able to basically appreciate basically these components in. So when we talk about diffuse lymphatic tissue, basically what that's going to be is it's going to be basically few scattered reticular tissue elements. And this distribution of tissue is found virtually in every organ, but large collections appear. But large collections of this type of tissue are going to appear in the mucous membranes and also in our lymphoid organs. Lymphoid tissue can also be found as follicles, lymphoid follicles, or nodules you can kind of think of. Now, when we talk lymphoid follicles, so this represents another way that lymphoid tissue is organized. Now, when we talk lymphoid follicles, basically we have nodules, and they're going to lack a capsule. They don't have a capsule, however, they're still solid. They're basically spherical bodies consisting of tightly packed reticular elements and cells. And in some of these lymphoid follicles, we're going to be able to appreciate germinal centers. And these germinal centers, they're going to be another region there, basically, and they're going to contain lots of B cells. Lots of B cells. So let's actually go through and let's look at our lymphoid organs. Let's start off by talking about our lymph nodes. Let's talk about our lymph nodes. So again, here we can see various tissue lymphoid organs basically throughout the body. And what we'll do is we'll focus first on the lymph nodes. And when we talk lymph nodes, I want you to know they're the principal lymphoid organ in the body. They are the principal lymphoid organ in the body. There's hundreds of these small organs that are going to be found throughout the body. So the location then? Location, now we can say they're going to be found clustered along the lymphatic vessels of the body. They are clustered along the lymphatic vessels of the body. And these lymph nodes are going to be embedded in connective tissue. They are embedded in connective tissue. So here you can see the structure of that lymph node. Now, when you talk about their function, you'll see they have two basic functions, and both are concerned with protection to the body. Number one, we'll see they're going to act as filters for blood. They contain macrophages, which destroy and remove microorganisms. And number two, they help activate the immune system. They help activate the immune system. So let's look at the structure of a lymph node. Now, when you look at the structure, let's talk first size and shape. Now, in vivo, they're going to look kind of like chickpeas. They're about the size of chickpeas or garbanzo beans, kind of. Now, again, size and shape is going to vary. Okay, this is just giving you just a little bit of a description. Size is going to vary. Okay, but most are going to be bean-shaped and less than 2.5 centimeters in length. Bean-shaped and less than 2.5 centimeters in length. So very small. Now, capsule you can appreciate here. When we talk about the capsule is dense, fibrous, connective tissue. And it's found surrounding each node. And it forms a trabeculae. And it forms you can see these trabeculate the capsule as it makes its way into the organ. These are like septa, like dividers you can kind of think of. Next in here we've got the trabeculae, so they're connective tissue strands that extend inward and divide the lymph node into compartments. Now the lymph node, you can see the inside of the lymph node gets divided up into a couple of different divisions. You've got the cortex here on the outside, and then we're going to be able to appreciate the medulla, just like we've seen with everything else. When we talk about the cortex, you can see the cortex is going to contain follicles. The cortex contains lymphoid follicles with many germinal centers. So it contains it contains these follicles with many germinal centers. And these germinal centers are going to be heavy. They're full, you can think of, with dividing B cells. They're full with dividing B cells. Now when you talk about the medulla, you can see right inside of here, you've got basically the cords and then the sinuses. Now when we talk about the medulla is going to consist of plasma cells. It will consist of plasma cells. So when you talk about the circulation in and out of the lymph node, when you talk about the circulation, you can appreciate here first the afferent lymphatic vessels. The afferent lymphatic vessels. These afferent lymphatic vessels, what they do is they provide an entrance for lymph. They provide an entrance for lymph into the lymph node, and they're found along this, you can see, convex side, and they're found along the convex side. Now, along the concave aspect of the lymph node, you can appreciate the efferent lymphatic vessels. The efferent lymphatic vessels are going to mark the exit point. So they are the exit point for lymph, and they're found on the concave side. And then they become swollen, basically engorged with cells when they're actively fighting infections. And that's why then what we do is we go around as physicians and we feel for lymph nodes, and then we can kind of, bring an idea down to the area where the infection could be at. I've had patients with abscesses in their head and post-auricular lymph nodes being swollen. So it's very, very helpful there. Next then we have our spleen. So here you can appreciate another picture of the lymph node. So next then we have our spleen. When we talk about the spleen, you'll see this is the largest lymphoid organ. The largest lymphoid organ we're going to have. Its functions. When we talk about functions, first here you're going to see it's going to provide a site for lymphocyte proliferation. Provides a site for lymphocyte proliferation. It's involved with immune surveillance. And immune response. It's involved with also immune response. Blood cleansing. Helps to clean the blood. It stores red blood cell breakdown products. We need them for certain organ systems sometimes. Also stores platelets. And it's involved in erythrocyte production in the fetus. So when you talk about erythrocyte production in the fetus, here we're going to see, first what happens is the yolk sac is going to be responsible for producing the erythrocytes. And as development continues, as time passes, then the liver takes over in the fetus. And then the spleen has the task for a little while, and then eventually the bone marrow is going to take over. So when we talk about the structure of this spleen, you'll see it's about the size of a fist. And it's going to be found located, and it will be found located in the left side of the abdomen, beneath the diaphragm. Obviously, right, because we're in the abdomen, beneath the diaphragm. And it curls around the stomach, you can kind of think of. It curls around the stomach. Now, when we talk about this spleen, you can see the spleen is going to have a capsule to it as well. And the capsule is fibrous, also making its way towards the inside of the organ, forming trabeculae. And these trabeculae, again, inward extensions. And they're going to contain, we'll see, macrophages and lymphocytes. Here we can see now the spleen is going to also contain white pulp and red pulp. It's made up of areas that we refer to as red pulp and white pulp. Now, white pulp first is areas that are composed mainly of lymphocytes that are suspended on reticular fibers. And also, when we talk white pulp, so areas composed mainly of lymphocytes suspended on reticular fibers. And we can see also this white pulp is going to cluster around the central arteries. It's going to be found clustering around these central arteries. Because when we talk red pulp, then the red pulp we're going to see is going to be basically cords of Billroth. And this red pulp is going to consist of, we'll see, fibrils and connective tissue cells. It will also have a large population now of macrophages and monocytes. And here we can see it also contains basically these venous sinuses. Next, then we have our thymus. When we talk about our thymus, then, the thymus is a bilobed structure. And the thymus, it's a site where T cells, where our T lymphocytes come, where you can think of the precursors to our T lymphocytes, the immature T lymphocytes. This is where they come to mature. They're formed in the bone marrow, and they migrate over to the thymus. So this is where T lymphocytes mature. This thymus is prominent in newborns. It's prominent in newborns. It's highly active in the first year of life. And then after puberty, it starts to atrophy. And then it becomes replaced by fatty and fibrous tissue. So when you talk size and location, it's going to be found in the inferior neck. It's found in the inferior neck, and it extends up into the superior, you can see it extends up into the superior thorax. So it's found in the inferior neck, and it extends down into the superior thorax. So right from here down into here. Now, when we talk thymus, the thymus, when you talk about the tissue here, now you can see has no follicles because it lacks B cells. And it has, you can see here, thymic corpuscles. Thymic corpuscles. Now, when we go through and we talk about tonsils, here we can appreciate our tonsils. We've talked a little bit about these tonsils, and the little bit is kind of what they do and the various types that we have. So here we can see their function is to trap and destroy bacteria. They trap and destroy bacteria. So when you get into the structure and you talk size and location, they're basically rings of lymphatic tissue. They are rings of lymphatic tissue that's going to be found around the entrance that's going to be found around the entrance of the pharynx. Found around the entrance of the pharynx. So you can see we've talked about the pharyngeal tonsils, right? We've talked about the palatine and the lingual there. So here when we go through, we talk tonsils. You can see here we've mentioned palatine. Palatine found as a pair. We said that they're going to be the most commonly infected tonsils. And they're going to be found at either side. They're found at either side at the posterior end of the oral cavity. Lingual, we described as a lumpy collection at the base of the tongue. Pharyngeal tonsils, they're known, we said, as your adenoids when they become enlarged. And they're going to be found located up in that posterior wall of the nasopharynx. Located up in the wall of the nasopharynx, we've described them. And the next one then you have to add is going to be your tubule tonsils. Now your tubule tonsils are going to be very tiny tonsils. They're going to be found surrounding the openings of the auditory tubes into the pharynx. That was the only entrance now into that area there that wasn't protected, right? We described them as being like bouncers, as being security. So now you can see all of those entrances basically that are going to make their way eventually into the larynx and esophagus and trachea, you can see are all blocked. When we talk tonsils, here you can see tonsils under the microscope. Tonsils are going to have these tonsillar crypts. These tonsillar crypts are blind ending, and they're formed by, you can see, epithelium that invaginates. That's going to invaginate to the interior. So whenever something makes its way up against the tonsils, it will be basically handled by then the tonsils, you can see. Next then we have Peyer's patches. Peyer's patches, and then the appendix as well. So here we can see Peyer's patches are going to be found as aggregated lymphoid follicles in the small intestine. And in the appendix we can see as an offshoot from the cecum, the first part of the large intestine. Now, what basically they are, now here, first, let's talk Peyer's patches, okay? So they're both here, they're both going to be components now that we believe are part of the lymphatic system. So they're going to be helping to protect us there as well. Now, when we go through and we talk Peyer's patches first, Peyer's patches are going to be large collections, we can see right in here, large collections of lymphoid follicles that are structurally similar to the tonsils. Now, Peyer's patches are going to be found located in the distal walls of the small intestine. And then the appendix is a tubular offshoot. It is a tubular offshoot from the first part of the large intestine, the cecum. Now, both of these components are found located in the GI tract. And again, we believe they help trap and destroy bacteria. And with the appendix, we're 100% not sure of its function fully there yet, but we believe it's also involved, along with these other lymphatic components, in generating also lymphocytes.